My name is Matty and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 31st, 1989. I'm a member of the East Naples Men's Group. We meet Monday nights. I'm on official leave. My sponsor signed off on it. When I shared the first time, I said, I really don't need your blessing, but I would like it. And I told you the story how that came. But we meet Monday nights, beginners meeting 6 to 7, home group 7:30 to 8:30. And I'm a lifetime member of the Belford Clearview Group, meets in Middletown, New Jersey, Tuesday nights at 8:30. Huh. So again, it's great to be here. You can always tell as we spend a little bit of time doing this, meetings are meetings, formats are different. But when you choose a home group, it has to be special. If you're going to be a member of it, get involved right away. But when we travel around and go to a lot of groups, you get to see, not that I would never say one's better than another, because that's not fair. There's no such thing as that. But there's certain groups where you just get that vibe, right? You get that electric feeling. In the 12 and 12, whatever page, 56 or 50 something, where Bill talks about the power of electricity, right? Whoever got here first and turned the lights on, that's electricity. I have no idea about Einstein's theory of relativity that the book talks about, or what electricity is. But how Bill, the tremendous wordsmith that he is, works that in of his description that God is that power. We don't see it, but we expect it. And that power gives us ease and comfort because we rely on it. And how he words it into a simple thing of electrical power. And then you see the last 2 weeks, I live on Hollywood Beach, and they're doing the 2-year project on A1A. A week ago Wednesday, they cut the fiber optic, so there was no internet, phone, or television for 36 hours. A week later, they cut it again. They're saying 3 articles we didn't have for almost 3 days. And I'm sitting there, I'm 71 years old, with my phone, and nothing's working. No TV. It's like, what do I do? I mean, I know how to read, so I just started to read. I got up and walked. You pray, you talk. There's things to do, but it made me stop and think how dependent we get on things. And as long as my dependence is on God, everything else I can handle. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But I haven't had the need to pick up a drink since 1989. Right? And I'm sitting here, I don't know whose laptop this is, and I share with you guys the famous story of the first night I drank, of the dance at the gym, or the night the men landed on the moon, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking, it's like, wow, there's a moon guy on the front of this thing here. And it just put into my thought of, where I was in the 80s and where I am in here today. So we got a little time. When I was leaving last week, Christian said, if you can, let's do a little bit more on step 3, and then we'll get into step 4. The famous, what I first heard it in rehab in Century House, people were calling it was the boogeyman step, until you come to realize it's only a list. It's only a list. So just quickly to a quick review. Boom. It's only we're here. So, right. Step 1, we admitted we were powerful over alcohol. Our lives have become unmanageable. Who wants to tell me the principle of step 1? Honesty. Very good. And I said, Ronnie and I named each one of the steps. I did the first 9 steps with them, and we called it the embarking step. And he said, we're not perfect, but your first step needs to be as perfect as you can make it. You're not going to be perfect, but the perfect part is not picking up a drink or a drug. And then we went to the second step, and I didn't talk about this there. I just wanted to give it that part. We called step 2 the 3-word step. You've probably heard it at a lot of meetings, right? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We call this one the 3-word step, right? Came to believe. We came. I've spoken of my spiritual advisor, Patty Brennan, who I shared to you about, about opening up the gates of heaven when I shared that. That was Patty's line. But he was the first time I really heard the word. He said, when we get here into step 2 with the insanity part, we arrive in a focus state. So I had to look the word up. There was no Google back there. You had to go to Webster's and you had to do a little work to find out. Right, George, it's why you got to do work sometimes. And I found out what Mocus is. I have 3 brothers. Um, One we lost to this disease many years ago. But my brother Mickey, his name is Fog. And that's, he, for a while walked along in a fog-like state. And when I would say to him, "You're Mocusing," what are you talking about? So when these things come back, you get to see that. So Ronnie and I called this the 3-word step. You came, you walk through the door. If you pick up a white shit today, you walk through the door. For that beginning for you to start, it's like going to the gym. The hardest part about a workout is walking through the door, right? I'm going to do it today. When you walk through the door, you're there. So you came, then you come to, you're out of that mocha state. And then you come to believe. Believe is the 3rd word that puts it all together. I love when Russell talks about, and when he's into, the thing about our relationship with God and the difference. And I understand today the difference. You know, he'll ask somebody, "Do you believe in God?" "Of course I believe in God." And then I'll stop. And he says, "Before you answer this question, I want you to think, do you believe God?" I can tell you, like we were talking about acceptance and admitted, I'll admit to anything to get myself out of a jam. But when I start accepting the consequences or the treasures and the gifts that will come, that's the difference between admit and accept. Do you believe in that God? And that's the part that I'm working into step 3 with. I talk about George Davis when I said making that decision, you know, years back, when Google was there, I Googled, I don't know if I mentioned it. The average adult makes 35,000 decisions a day. You know, we here only have to make one good one. You know, for many years, like the hit song from the Strokes, "Bad Decisions." Well, I made a lot of bad, some worse than others. But today, when my eyes open and I ask the God of my understanding, first words are always "thank you." Direct my way. I get into my prayer and meditation. It sets the course for me. And that's the way that it works. I believe. I believe in God and I believe God. And that's what we came into that part there of a little bit of that to finish up step 2. Who wants to tell me the principle of step 2? All right. Extra credit for whoever says that. And I have this written. Remember, this is I'm almost positive I did this book once. It could be twice, but I forgot. But when I did the notes with Ronnie, I got out of Century House, the rehab in Red Bank, New Jersey in April of 1989. When we started working on the steps after I had that courage to ask her to be my sponsor, it was the spring. And we're working at as we're working on step 2, as I'm doing the work, the Beatles song, because it was a horrible winter in 1989 and the spring was starting to come out, the snow was melting. I used to take the bus to this place called Airport Plaza in Hazlet, New Jersey. That was my commute into the city, 52 miles. Airport Plaza had a huge parking lot. The snow mound in 1989 was there in May. The winter had been that bad. The sun finally melted it in May. And then I wrote in listening one time, the Beatles, "Here Comes the Sun." And I'm looking at I hadn't looked at this in years, and it gives me that feeling. Believe in God? Of course, it gives me that, and that was that. As him and I were doing this, I said, "Here comes the sun." Right? And at the step 3, who knows the principle of step 3? Good job, Kip. There you go. And remember, we went through the whole thing about opening the door, the key to willingness. I talked about that. I didn't know you were speaking Arian's way, I'm assuming. All right. So over the door of the 12-step house, if you've ever been there, is the cutout key, and right across it is the word willingness. You put the key in the lock, the light comes on, you walk through, you read that inscription. This is a way to faith, right? That comes in there. And we went over that about making the decision, how important it is about in the chapter of We Agnostics. And I had written this too when Marty and I were doing this, asking him about this decision, this, I don't want to say deal, this power that I had to believe in, who I knew as God, that I had to trust. I didn't trust myself all the time. But as these weeks are going on and things are changing, you know, one of my first sponsees, when I would tell my story, he said, when you tell your story in the beginning, you're like an aunt, a UN. Because I would say, when I got here, I was unteachable. I was unlovable. I was unemployable. All those things there. I said, I was an aunt. And then remember, 7 Up had the big ad, the Cola, right? So I got all these things like that. The little trivial things that you remember that just fortifies my sobriety, right? And that was into that. And I shared about the first time about when I heard the Big Book seminar on Zoom, and when the guys were doing about we agnostics and we are reborn. Step 3 opened that door for me to be reborn. And the whole third step prayer, and I talked about Doc and, the on drowning in the sea of alcohol, walking onto the beach, a man. I have now become a man. Let's go into step 4. And I remember as I'm sitting in Sentry House, the deal there was your third week there, you had to do what was called your qualifications. So remember I had shared with you, there were 32 of us, things that you remember, 32 of us in the rehab for the 28 days that I was there. So it was my turn for the third week, and I'm watching people, because you had to get up in front of the room, and people wouldn't do it. The fear was gripping them, that the boogeyman thing that they were calling it that, and it was all they wanted to do in the rehab there was to look at where you were, where are you going with this inventory, right? Into your step 4 of inventory, right? So again, on the qualifications of that, and Ronnie and I, we call this the get down step. We get down. We get down to causes and conditions, as the book states. Now, when I did my when I did my qualifications in the third week, and anybody that's heard me speak, this is one of my little treatful stories. Um, I wrote everything out, and I went up in front of the room and I told my life story, right? And man, they were clapping, and it's like that. Boom, feed the ego, right? Ego, ease God out, right? And so now when I get out, I share with you guys that 3-minute 12-step, and he said, "I'm dropping you off at this meeting. I want you to see this guy. They asked you to be your sponsor." And I said, "It took me weeks to do it, but I finally did." So now we're working on step 4, and we're going through it, and it's, they get down, and we said, it's it or if. If you're not in, this could happen. And he said, "Don't be afraid. It's just a list. It's courage, right? It's courage, right? The principle of step 4, I should have asked. I know Paul knows what it was. It's courage on there in the 4th step, the principle." And I wrote this a few years later, the best description of courage I ever heard. And it's from Nelson Mandela. And it says, courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. You know, we battle. We inner turmoil, things like that. If you're newly sober or if you're decades sober, there's inner turmoil and stuff. The difference for us on the courage part of this is we know how and who to see to try to remedy that, and it will work if you let it work. So, right, it's that made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And then for those of us, that have been doing this for a little bit, when I first read that, the first time you're reading all the stuff, right? You're reading the window shades and you see the word moral. And I thought, by this point in time, as I shared with you, I was 34 years old, you know, um, picking up my first drink at 14, 20 years of, at times, a pretty decadent life, things that I certainly was never proud of, but I had to deal with that. I had to have the courage to face those things, knowing that I was going to have to fix them on the way down. But he would tell me, we're working on step 4. Don't worry about 8 or 9 yet. This is just a list that you're going to be making, right? Just have the courage. So this is anybody from our New Jersey peeps. There was a woman called Ruth O'Neill. Ruth was sober 68 years. She was a friend of Bill and Lois, and she ended up at the end of her life living in Toms River, New Jersey. And if you ever heard it, a lot of people had. I had never heard it until many, many years ago. I had never met her, but she wrote what was called Ruth's Prayer, Ruthie's Prayer, right? And this is it, because I just did the quick summary of 1, 2, and 3. And this to me summarizes those first 3 steps that will give you the courage, the thankfulness of AA to do your 4th step. So this is Ruth's prayer. Thank you, dear God, for another day, the chance to live in a decent way, to feel again the joy of living and the happiness that comes from giving. Thank you for friends who understand and the peace that flows from your loving hand. Help me to wake with the morning sun, with the prayer today, your will be done. For with your help, I will find the way. Thank you again, dear God, for the program of AI. Pretty cool. Right? These 2 women, Ruth O'Neill and Geraldine Delaney, 2 older women from New Jersey that I never met. Again, disembodied voices carry the message that has helped me through times when I needed that strength. Mrs. Delaney had the famous line that I had was, she called herself an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. She had this big rehab, but still the legality of the rehab had changed. It was always privately funded, and thousands of people went through it. It was a long-term rehab called the Alina Lodge, ALINN. And she was Mrs. Delaney was the boss. She was the commandant. And it's funny, I our Jersey guys that I knew, I'm in my home group in when I first joined East Naples, and I mentioned my first meeting with Mrs. Delaney. There's 5 guys in my home group that went to Alina Lodge. Mace, correct? Slender threats. All right. So Mrs. Delaney was there the night of my home group in West New York, New Jersey, and I shared Ronnie was my sponsor. So when I picked up my 90 days, he was celebrating 10 years. And Mrs. Delaney was the guest speaker. I think it was the group's anniversary. I think back then it was 40 cent. It was an old route early on in West New York because it was so close to the city. And then she got up and she looked like my grandma. And she got up and I'd lean into Lonnie, I'm going to be cute and humorous. I'm always looking for the little. And I just said to him, lean into him. And I said, what could this woman possibly say that I'm going to understand? And he he gave me one of his things that as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I shouldn't have said it, right? How many of us I do it daily, right? You know? And he gave me the meeting was about to start, and we were up front, as he always and he gave me I don't know if he gave me said anything or just gave me the look like, and I got it. I got it good. Well, as soon as she started, I hung on every word because, you'll hear and you see, it doesn't matter who the speaker is. You'll hear parts of your story or your story. So moments before when I make that remark about this old woman, what could I possibly have in common with her? She hit everything about my alcoholism and my defects of character. And then it was one of the guys from our group, Alina Watch, friend that was with her, that was on the board. He would always remind everybody, Geraldine Owen Delaney, initials G-O-D. You know, slender threads. That's what she was like. And it was when she would say that thing about the ego and inferiority complex. I always shared it was deep down inside. Here's the example that I give. Now, I'm the oldest of six in my family, three boys, three girls. My three brothers and I was in a small town, Waldwick, New Jersey, which I just saw on a reel, whatever they're called on Facebook now, was voted the safest town in New Jersey, population 9,000 and something. And that's where I grew up. It was a great small town and a lot of friends, but there was cake parties in the woods. And that was what it was like. Cake parties. Me and two of my best friends worked in Shanley's restaurant. And I was a busboy. One guy was cleaned he was the chef, and the other guy was like cleaning the kitchen. And when we would close, we would walk back. One guy would pull the truck around. We would take a keg of beer and go into the woods, and the parties would start. Here's a quick aside. As you're trying to pull things over, and I'd mentioned my dad a couple of times. The cops wouldn't. It was so far back in the woods, the cops wouldn't come. Right, big bonfire. You know, everybody was falling in love. Kegs of beer. Then we got smart and started selling the cups for like $1 a piece to cover our end. Right, big bonfire. And I got caught doing something, and I'm grounded, and I'm sneaking out of the window. And it's my dad was a disciplinarian, and it's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm coming in the house. So let me try the door first before I climb in the window. And the door's open, and the house is black, right? So I come open the door softly, up tiptoeing in. No light was put on, but he's smoking his cigarette in his chair, and he cups it, and the red from him breathing in the cigarette, the red light of the cigarette like lit up the room. And he's looking at me, and I'm like, and I'm dead. And he said, I'm assuming, now I'm drunk. He says, I'm assuming you were in the cake party in the woods because all the other parents at small town, they all heard of that. I said, not me, Dad. Now, at this point in time, I went through many costume changes, but now this one I'm wearing for this part of the summer was this long army jacket, like a duster, like one of those Western dusters, right? And he's looking at me and he said, take your coat off. And I take the coat off. Evidently, a cinder had gotten on the bottom of my duster, and the coat's on fire, and it's smoking away. And I was saying, I wasn't in the woods. I was in there, delusional alcoholic thinking at 17 years old, and that would follow. So here we are with this. It was here we are at step 4. When Ronnie and I started it and we really got into it, and it got to be, we went right to the book. Oh, here was the part about the screen. I mean, my qualifications, right? So now we're at step 4, and I'm delaying. And he says to me, "This is it. You you come up and meet me at my house. We're gonna go." He lived in Hoboken. We're gonna go up. to the river, Hudson River, and we're gonna sit down on the benches. I'm gonna see your fourth step, and we'll do your fifth step." I said, "That's good." I get that. I'm looking at these columns. I'm looking at the word fearless. I'm looking at moral thinking. He's wants to hear every deviant thing that I ever did, right? Not knowing the true stuff. I didn't even crack open the books to look at, I didn't even know that, and everybody has the t-shirts now, that Mr. Brown was an asshole. I didn't know that, you know? So I go to meet him, and I'm gonna be smooth and slick like I always am. "You got your fourth step." And I hand them the qualifications that I did in rehab, right? And to his credit, he reads it. And I'm thinking, "Oh, maybe I can this gonna get away with this." He reads it, and thankfully, he didn't tear it up. And he said to me, "Matty, what is this? What is this screenplay that you're handing me?" He said, "What do you think? You're gonna, like, be in the movies? What, are we gonna get Richard Gere to play your part in the movies?" He said, "Open the book." Thank God I brought the book with me, "and look at the columns. You got 1 week. Now come back." And then we start at the columns, right? And I went through all of that there with them, of the 4 columns, and we went to that first column, right, of the resentment, and these are the notes that I had, and him and I are discussing. We would discuss this, and "Well, how do I do the first column?" And this is what he told me. "We go back through our life, and we list the people, principles, and institutions with whom we were angry. The people on this list, the resentment list that I had, will become part of the base for when I do my 8th step." Now, when I first met Paul, when Paul works with the new guys, Paul Baker, and he's doing their 5th step with there and listening, he makes the guys take a separate piece of paper and add those names. Of course, they'll become the base step for your 8th step. And genius, right? So it was like that. So then we're going through that. The second column is the cause. Why am I angry and resentful? You know, we look at the specifics that made us feel that way. These harms, what did I do? What was that part in there? When it comes down to, and it's again, when the first time, and I always show this pattern, first time I saw this, I said, "Man, that's the way to." I wish they would have had this in 1989 when I was doing this. Then I wouldn't have had to listen to his stuff where he was breaking my chops about my screenplay, right? So now that I'm doing this, and I said to him at the end when we were done, I said, "This was a lot of hard work, these columns, you know? I sort of like my screenplay better." And you just, yeah, you go with that, you go with that, So we had all those things in there: the social, the security, the sex, and the ambitions. So in my third column, and right where we talk about the effects, the things that are going down, fear. When I talk to God almost every day, and when my mind races and I'm feeling, or I make a decision that it really wasn't the best one, or maybe I treated somebody a little bit incorrectly, or maybe again the words, I try not to gossip. I really work hard on that. I try to listen. I try to be instructive, constructive, right? But sometimes, you fail, and I'll ask on my nightly inventory. I don't write, and I was talking about, "I'm jumping into bed. Don't be sending me any 10 step inventories because I'm asleep already." So it's, I'm there as I'm talking to my God, and I'm saying, "Please, I still have that black thread in my soul. It used to be this big. Now it's a thread." And I'm pretty much convinced that we'll probably have it for the rest of our lives because it's an awakening. The key for when you're not doing what you should be doing, that evil, corrosive threat. So I pray every night when I'm doing my my inventory. And when we get to step 10, I'll go over that. And it's for me, it's about SDRF. I review where was I selfish today? Where was I dishonest today? Where was I resentful today? And then I tackle that last one. Where was that black thread today? I don't know if I share it, you know, I talk to Jesus every day, all throughout the day. I've shared before. Pat's been there on my balcony. I have an outdoor cross about this big on the sidewall, and I sit there and we talk. Like, but when I wake up, the first thing he allows me to make my coffee first before I go outside to the balcony, right? And I stand there and I just say, "Good morning, my Lord and my God, true God, a true man." And I'll stand there and I'm looking out at the ocean, and it may sound corny, but I don't mind sharing it because it's part of my recovery. It's part of my conversation with this God I met in step 3. And I'm looking at the tortured body of our Savior, put it that way, right? And I put my hand on the crown of thorns and I'll say, "Open my mind. I want to be kind." And I'll touch the eyes. "Open my eyes. I want to be wise." Then I touch the ears. "Open my ears so that your message is clear." And I touch the pierced heart. "Open my heart so that I can be smart." And then finally, I just put my hand on it. "Open my soul so I can be whole." Takes a minute, 30 seconds, but it gets me going. And then, as we all know, I'll be running over to Publix, some jerk cuts me off. I don't give people the finger, but man, I want to say F you people, right? Yeah, and then the thought is, what happened about you were just touching Jesus's body, and now it's, you know, so it's all into that. But that's the decision. That's the God of my understanding that it's in there, that affects my third column. I'm able, and this I did a long, long time ago, right? But it affected what? My pride, my personal relationships, my self-esteem, emotional security, right? Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier, Bill Oakes' famous pamphlet. He wrote it 23 years sober. It turned his thing around. He was fading, but he rediscovered that decision that he made at step 3 about the God of his understanding. Tremendous. And then how it affects my ambition with the hardest part for me was the sex relations, and he knew me by then. He knew what was coming. I'm married a while, but I had told him my whole story. And then I said, "I don't know how to do this. What do you want me to do with this thing? I'm afraid to tell you some stuff." And he said, "Well, if you don't tell me these things, you don't drink again." That woke me up. That woke me up. He said, "Matty, this is not a list of your sexual conquests. Your one night stands at Studio 54 or all the bars that you hung out in New York. It's not about that. It's about the people that you say that you love and care for, that your actions, your selfishness hurt them. How did it hurt them? Go over that. Go over that part of your sex relations. That your selfishness, that you wanted what you had, you would say anything to any woman to get what you wanted or needed and then walk away." I used to tell this, and this is when I was young, guys with my inner circle of friends, would see me leave. And then either the next day, right back in the bar, and everybody wants to know what happened with whomever, you know. And I would, like I said the other night, about the other week, about when I threw my family's food out on 42nd Street because she kept following me up the bar. You walk in like the cock right here. But that was years later, making needs when you make your amends. How did these women feel about what I did to them? That was the core then of that column, and it woke me up, woke me up. I had 2 daughters. It woke me up quick. And then on the fourth, like we're talking on the fourth column, you know, what was my part in all this? And I was just explaining to that there. So I looked at all four of those columns on who my resentments, the whole list of everything, principles, institutions, people, employers, all those things that I had to make right, which over time I did. And also moving in, I have written, continuing with our list, we further look at huh, how I compromise my principles. One of the guys years back that I was sponsoring, still sober now, he said, I'm not sure what you need about principles, you know? So I asked, one of the guys that 12 step me there, and he said, oh, I can only give you the principles when I did my step work. And he said, your drinking, my alcoholism affected these basic principles. So I wrote all these down. It affected all my ideas. It affected all my beliefs. It affected my morals. It affected, and I couldn't understand it, but I had to ask, it affected my philosophy on life. I would look at it like this way, leading an alcoholic lifestyle, you're leading, looking at it one way. But when you get sober, you look at it in a different way. How it affect my conduct, how it affect my ethics, and how it affected my thinking. And he said, start there, right? There's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. 7 principles that you can share with any of your sponsees, and that's a good starting point there. And then we get right into how the resentments then walk through our views and the other parts there. How do we how it affect us on the physical toll that it took on our bodies, right? How it affected people's marriages and schools, education and work, all those different institutions there that my alcoholism affected. Yeah. I bailed on my school lunch, you know, but they catch up with you. Yeah. You're doing when you start doing your amends and you start going, remember when there was no Google, there was none of that stuff. The only credit report that was out was called TRW. And you would get this huge green computer readout. So he's working with me you know, to you've got to start making financial, when we get up into that stuff there. But it's those things there that affected me into that fear inventory there. When in effect, when I talk about, and again, it's the corroding thread that I talk about here. I was he's in the program, and I don't even mind mentioning her name. I played golf yesterday with Arthur Rice. Arthur's a member of the Fort Lauderdale Golf and Country Club. So when he asks me to play, I jump right at it, actually. So we're playing, and one of the fellows we were playing with was a fellow by the name of John O'Keefe. God said I could use his name. He was Ray O'Keefe's son, and I didn't know that. And then him and I went it together, and we had a great time talking about him growing up and his dad. And I told him the story, how Ray changed my recovery by me listening to him on a cassette tape. And it was great. So we were talking. So Ray's description of steps 1, 2, and 3, and then the lead into step 4 for me was perfect. Now, when I always mentioned the Belfort Clearview group, we had to change 4 different times because the meeting kept it. There you go. And one church basement, when I talked about, man, when the smoke was so thick you couldn't see across the room, they had the smoke eaters in the ceiling. They go good, but they were there. And there was on the wall one of the grapevine caricatures, right? And I think I might have shared this. And it's the 12 steps. And it's that little AA guy that they always have at Grapevine. And he's standing on the landing of the 3rd step. And he's looking up. Now, the 4th step is up here. And he's looking up to the sky. And it says, I need help with the next step. And that was like the importance that I was shown and told, don't be afraid of doing your 4th step. There's help out there for you. So Ray would talk about, and he said, steps 1, 2, and 3, just picture this. It's triage, right? You're in this horrible accident. And I was, yeah, you're taken to the emergency room. And I was trying to picture a trauma center. And I was telling my daughters and stuff, and last time I went to Jersey back in the fall, and we were talking to one of the guys from the program, and I'm talking about the trauma center. And she said, Dad, you and I just started watching The Pit, that series. That's a trauma center. There's chaos, right? So he says, you come in, first thing they do is they stop you from dying. They stabilize you. There's step one, right? The- That's how the drinking is stopped. And then step two, they're checking all your vitals. And then step three, you're now stable. And then he called step four is the difference. If you're willing to make that decision, they bring you up on an ice gurney. They put you up on the fourth floor, and a guy comes in, like Bill and Bob carrying the Bible, and sit at the end of your bed and tell you this is the road. This is now your fourth step. So you're at it. The bleeding stopped. The drinking has stopped. The pain will eventually go away, but there's work involved. And that's, and then he's very adamant. If you don't take this, you'll drink again. You'll drink again. I've been told, and I tell all my guys, and I'll wrap it up in a minute or two. So, but what it is, when you work with guys, and sometimes you can see it, some you have to be a little harder with others. And I'll just tell them, step four, you want to summarize? It's 3 words. It's 3 words that affected you and everyone that comes into the program, right? It's money, it's power, and it's sex. Those 3 things. If you're afraid to do the column, start there. Look at those instances there where you went wrong with those 3 with your drinking, and your stuff going to be in there. So I'm gonna finish with this because it's one normally how I finish my step four. You've heard me share about my dad and my sons. God bless. And some notes. Search. If Here it is. In high school, Don Bosco High School, like I shared about, I I was horrible in math, algebra, trigonometry, algebra 2. I was horrible in chemistry, but I loved to read and I loved history and literature. And in one of our things, we did a study on Rudyard Kipling, and he wrote a famous poem called If. And when I was 17, my dad came to me, and I shared this with you guys. I mean, he saw the way I was going from 14 to there. So for my 17th birthday, he bought me a pack of cigarettes. He bought me a lighter, and he handed me this framed poem from Rudyard Kipling called If. And when I finished this on the fourth step, I just read the final paragraph because it was the conversation that I had. I've said to you guys, I have 11 grandkids, right? I have 6 grandsons and 5 granddaughters. The 3 oldest have all been 17. I gave my sons a framed copy of Rudyard Kipling's If when they hit 17, and I've given it to my 3 grandsons for them to keep. Keep it, don't. It's just what helped me. But the last paragraph in this, and if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtues, or walk with kings and not lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiven moment with 60 seconds worth of a distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you're now a man, my son. Love you guys. Thank you.